Ladies and gentlemen, stick around. We've got Ideas by Elliot. Hey, folks, you're listening to Ideas by Elliot. And we're here with Ideas by Elliot. Podcast.
All right, I'm here with Heba, Mohammad.
That's right.
Pretty close?
Yep. That's
okay.
Great.
And you are a city council candidate?
That's correct.
Okay, tell me about that.
So I am a candidate in District 6 for alderperson.
Where's District 6?
District 6, it's about from East Shore Drive up University to Webster. So it encompasses Bay Beach, the Wildlife Sanctuary, the Dan's, Eastman area. So that chunk of space.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And is there a primary election?
There is not.
Okay.
The only people running are myself and the incumbent.
Okay. And all right. So tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and why. And we'll dig in a little more. But why do you think why are you running? First of all,
Sure.
Why don't you cover that?
Sure. So a little bit about myself. I'm originally from the Milwaukee area, and I moved up to Green Bay about 6 years ago to go to school at UW Green Bay. And after that, I decided to stay in the area. I did a year with AmeriCorps in the area, and now I'm working in an after-school setting with kids. So it's been quite the journey, and I've enjoyed Green Bay quite a bit.
What are you going to school for?
I went to school for political science and history and environmental policy and politics.
Okay, and so you're done with
I'm
school.
done with school, yep.
I only ask because you're here with your UW
Right.
Green Bay
Well,
Phoenix
yeah,
sweatshirt
there's
on.
a lot of pride.
Home
I still
team.
take a lot of pride in our university and what it offers to our community.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the reason that I'm running is because I found myself looking for other places to live and to start my life. And I think a lot of young professionals go through that when they're in Green Bay, whether they've lived here their entire lives or they just came here for school. I think a lot of us find ourselves in that position where we want to be somewhere that has more resources for us, better job opportunities. And I thought, I'm here and I enjoy being here. So what can I do to make it a place where I want to stay? And so that's the primary reason that I'm running, because I want to make this a place that I want to stay. I want to make it a place that everyone wants to stay, because I think there are plenty of people who have had similar thoughts and who are in a similar position as I am.
So you're like in your 20s.
Right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And only because when Rhonda was here, she was talking about young people want to leave. Mm-hmm. I'd say you're young.
Yes.
And old people die. And
Wow.
And I'm like, well, I don't know. Am I old? Am I young? Because I'm not leaving, but I'm not dead. I don't know what's going on. So, but anyway, so that's interesting. I've heard that a few times now from everybody that we're trying to combat brain drain to a certain extent. So people graduate from UWGB, they move away, or they, whatever, young people, they don't even go to school at UWGB and they move away, right? Mm-hmm. So what are you going to try to do to combat some of those things?
Sure. So I think there are a couple of contributing factors to why young people want to leave. The first is our job market is not very diverse. So we're very industry, manufacturing heavy in this area, which is great. I think they contribute a lot to our city and the economy. But when I think about myself and having studied the programs that I was participated in those programs, it's hard to find a history job. We have the Neville Museum, which does a great job, which is why people are always applying to work there. We have some opportunities at UW Green Bay, but if I want to find a job in history, the opportunities are limited. Same with political science. Outside of being a political scientist, and there's not a lot of opportunity for that in this area either. It's hard to pinpoint a job market for the degrees that I have. Some people might say that's my fault, but that's what I was passionate about, and that's what I wanted to study, so I did. So I think trying to diversify that job market, and I'll be the first to admit that there's a lot of planning that's going to have to go into that, and a lot of learning on my part that I'll have to do to understand precisely how we're going to make that happen. But if I were to be on city council, there are 12 people in total who are all going to be able to contribute their ideas to that. And as long as someone is bringing up the concern, I think the opportunity to find a solution presents itself.
So what do you think that the city council has done in the past to create that problem situation?
I don't know if it's something specifically related to city council, but I think historically that's just how Green Bay has developed.
Okay, so you think it's like just a cultural thing.
Right.
So what do you think the city council can do to combat that, though?
Sure. So another problem that we have is not enough entertainment that's geared towards young people. So we have a big drinking culture in Green Bay, in Wisconsin generally. So that tends to be where young people go for entertainment. But I think we need to have more options for that, for young people to get out there, to meet other people.
What else is there?
Other than drinking? Yeah, good question. And we do have opportunities. We have the Meyer, we have theaters that people can go to, but I don't know if, as a young person, a college student, that I would want to go to that necessarily. So just trying to diversify our opportunities where people can get together, share their ideas. And there are things going on in the city. You have the current Young Professionals Network that tries to connect young professionals, that tries to put on events to draw them together and to help with the networking. But I think we could stand to have a little bit more outside of the drinking culture.
Okay, so, and I hear that a lot, that we have a drinking culture, but we also have a great music culture.
We do.
And that's a great place for musicians to play, is at a bar where, people are there to drink, but also there to see the music. And
Sure.
so it's like, I recognize that we could have more, but we are still just a city of 100,000 people.
Sure.
When I compare Green Bay to other similarly sized cities, I don't know that we're horribly lacking. I mean, yeah, we have a little more emphasis on drinking, but I actually maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm pretending to be optimistic.
Okay.
I don't know because I know so many musicians and I know how hard they work at that.
Right.
And we do have other things that maybe aren't interesting to college students, but what would be? We have theater. We have a few theaters really, and like what else do the kids want these days?
Sure. I think a lot of it has to do with just having these gathering places, So one of the more popular spots in town is Kavarna, and that for students, if we're talking about students specifically, to get to Kavarna from campus is quite the haul, even if you have a vehicle yourself. So I think being able to create more of those gathering spaces in a similar fashion to Kavarna.
Or maybe you just need to have a city-sponsored shuttle bus to run between Kavarna and UWGB.
Yep, that will be something that I will mention. But and that's another thing. So I have my own perspective of when I was in school what I would have liked, and now as a young professional what I would like. But
Awesome.
That's not necessarily representative of what everyone likes. So I think a big part of that will be getting other people to give up their opinions and to say, this is what I'd like to see. This is what would help me make the decision to stay. So I think jobs and entertainment are two issues, and then the public transportation I think is another huge one. We're very fortunate to have a public transportation system, period. Given the size of our city, it's very necessary. But I do feel that there's a lot of improvements that need to be made. And for talking about UWGB, yes, there needs to be a more direct way of getting students from the campus to town, to the east side, to the west side, too. But in general, too, there's just a lot of gaps in service. A big issue that I could bring up is there isn't any Sunday service unless there's a Packer game in town. Then there's Sunday service.
Okay.
But that's egregious. The fact that
how do you combat that? Because the presumably there's not enough demand to pay for it. And I understand that there's a little chicken and egg sort of situation there, but I think that most public transportation is subsidized to a certain degree. And my assumption, and I haven't researched that, my assumption would be that Sunday service isn't worth it. So how would you how would you get that change kind of done?
Sure. So I disagree that Sunday service isn't worth it, and I think you would hear that statement from the people who do run Green Bay Metro Transit, and perhaps from some city representatives as well. But I disagree wholeheartedly because there are people who can't go to work on Sunday because of that, who might not be able to get jobs because of that.
So do you think that whoever made that decision, you think they're just jerks? I mean, like, why would they make that decision?
I wouldn't put it that way. I think some people are more concerned about finances and about making sure that.
So if there is
if
there's a finance shortfall though, how do you make up for that? Because that's what they would say. They'd say,
Sure.
all right, Heba, you have you want Sunday bus service. How are you going to pay for it?
Sure. So I think our city government plays a role in that, obviously, and that the concern with Green Bay Metro Transit is that they don't just serve the Green Bay area, right? So they serve municipalities next to Green Bay as well. So when you have a conversation with them, they're going to tell you, well, you have to get Green Bay on board, and you have to get all these other cities on board, De Pere and all these other areas. So how are you going to do that? And just because it's difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't try, right? And so that would be an issue that I would approach all of these municipalities with, saying we have gaps in these services, and perhaps you don't think your residents need it, but overall to have a thriving area and where people can go to jobs, where they can work later, which is another issue. The buses stop running at 9:45. And if you work a second, third shift job and need to get home, how do you expect to do that? And I've overheard several conversations of people who do take the bus regularly that, I'm going to have to leave my job, or I'm getting less hours because I have to leave early from work to get home on the one route that goes past my house every hour. And so I think it's a jobs issue. If we connect it to that and say, here are all these people who can't work as much as they'd like, who can't contribute as much as they like, how are we going to fix that?
Okay.
I think that's really important, especially when we have a diversifying community in Green Bay who might not have the resources for vehicles, or who are making the conscious decision not to have a vehicle for whatever reason.
Okay. So now I was easy on you. Now we're gonna get. Now it's gonna be tough.
Oh boy. Okay.
No, not really. You. I guess what I try to say to everybody that's running, especially when there's so many people running, and there's sort of like it's hard to see the forest for the trees, right?
Yep.
When people are going to the voting booth, and they see names listed. To me, I think, because this has happened to me in the past.
Yep.
Because it's hard to be engaged enough to know enough about everybody.
Sure.
So at best, usually you can hope to get some sort of a label attached to you, right? So don't take offense at this,
Sure.
but I'm gonna if it were just me and I hadn't talked to you and I don't get to talk to you for a whole half hour, right? I might say, so she's a young girl, and it's political science, so she's probably using this as a stepping stone. So tell me how I'm wrong about that assessment, or what more you'd like people to hear.
Sure. So I am young. I don't see that as a negative, though. I see that as an opportunity to bring a lot of enthusiasm and energy and optimism to the city council. I'm not quite at the age where I've been jaded enough to not try to make a difference. And as far as you're going to have to repeat your assessment of me. I'm young, and
you're young, political science major.
Political
so
science, yes,
is this a stepping stone?
Right.
So and it's sort of an unwinnable thing, right? You have to kind of demonstrate this balance between being good enough and enthusiastic enough, but not so good and so enthusiastic that people think you're just going to run for governor.
Sure.
Right.
Right, and that's not in the cards at all. I'm not planning that at all. Long term, I would tell people my goal, actually, career-wise, is to work with refugees. And a lot of that has to do with my personal background. Both of my parents are refugees, and so I have a lot of interest in helping those individuals. So I can't see myself using this as a stepping stone to anything bigger. But part of Green Bay is that we have a growing population of people who are refugees. In one way or another. And so if I were to get elected, I would love to be able to help that community a little bit more and to give them resources. But also, I could see myself staying here because there are opportunities to help people in this city. And when I say long-term career goals, I'm talking like 20, 30 years down the line. So I still have a lot of time in Green Bay that I would love to invest in this community because I am here. And like I said, I want to make it a place that I want to stay because there's a lot of good and we can always make it better.
Okay, and you mentioned refugees in the area.
Yep.
So elaborate on that a little bit, because
Sure.
I don't think people really know that.
Yep. So historically, the Fox Valley area in general has received a lot of Hmong refugees. Right. We've resettled them here, and more recently there's been a larger influx of Somali immigrants. And if people aren't aware, there's quite the conflict going on in Somalia, and so it's forced a lot of people to leave to look for safer places to be. I think when most people now think of refugees, they're going to think of the Syrian refugee crisis, which is a huge crisis. But I don't know that Green Bay itself is doing a lot to help with that, or to resettle people here. So, I mean, it might be something that we do in the future, and something that honestly I would hope to advocate for, because we could use new perspectives in the city, new talent, people who are looking for a community where they can invest themselves into. And I find that refugees tend to be very grateful for where they are relocated and want to contribute, if given the right opportunities and the right connections.
Okay, so when I feel like my job is to play devil's advocate all the time. Okay, so I don't necessarily believe everything that I say, but I try to represent what I think people might be thinking when you say things like that. And so when people talk about refugees, or when politicians talk about refugees and how we need to open up our communities and all that, I think some of the fear there is there's a few things, right? Yeah. So they're like, well, these are unknown people, so and they almost by definition don't have a job right away, so they're going to be a drain on resources in some fashion, and if we don't have the resources to offer them, then they might be criminals. Okay. Or only the bad ones will come. So you said that there's some opportunities and some diversity, and so kind of make those things like, how would you answer that if somebody objected?
Sure. So the first thing I would say is the United States itself takes a very small portion percentage-wise of the total number of refugees worldwide, and the refugees that they do take are the most security vetted group that enter the United States of anybody. And so when we talk about concerns of people coming into our community, I understand why it might be there, but if you look at the facts, and people don't, when they're making decisions and developing opinions, facts oftentimes don't play a role in that, especially right up front. But if you look at the facts, these are going to be some people who are selected because they are safe. They don't have any connections to any terrorist groups or any problems like that, and because they have qualities and talents that they can contribute to communities. And as far as getting them those resources and those jobs and getting them connected, typically the United States has a partnership with about 9 to 12 different nonprofits that work specifically with refugees. And their job is to resettle these individuals and families oftentimes, and get them those jobs right away, get them resources, put them into training so that they understand American culture and the English language. So these organizations that are helping with this want the people that they resettle to succeed, right? So that they don't have these stereotypes attached to them, so that they can prove to people that I'm not what you think. I'm not the things that you see on television and in the news. I am someone who wants to be here and who wants to be safe. And to that, I think that's another aspect that people don't tend to think about, is that refugees have suffered so much, and they've gone through all the things that we're afraid of going through by letting them in, right? They've been stolen from, they've been hurt, they've been put into situations where they've had to make tough decisions that they probably never want to make again. So by giving them these opportunities, I think we're really giving them an opportunity to restart and to reclaim their own lives. And people who have that opportunity, I think, make the most of it when they have it.
Okay. And again, devil's advocate.
Yep.
And I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you.
First of all, I know you said you were a little nervous.
Yeah.
Nobody listens to this, so don't worry about it. So I feel like when I hear those things, it sounds to me like you're a little bit ideological. And so how would you, as a representative with constituents, if those people in the aggregate don't quite mesh with your ideology, like how are you going to effectively make decisions? So if there's something that you could go either way, but you know that the majority of people in your district feel a certain way, and you feel very strongly because of your ideology a different way, how would you make that work?
Sure. So the number one thing for me is to understand what people in my district who I'm representing feel. That's very important. That's probably my number one role, right, as a representative. So in a case where there's majority of people who disagree with my opinion, I would want to hear that, because that's who I'm accountable to first and foremost. So whether it's getting together and having a meeting with our neighborhood associations or going door to door and asking people for opinions, and also explaining my own so that we can be closer to understanding one another. And I guess you're right. I am very ideological and optimistic that, I can talk to people and help them see my perspective. But if I'm thinking about a general situation, I would want to represent what my constituents want. In the same facet, I understand that as a city council person, I would represent my district, but also the city as a whole. So I think that would play a role in it, as well as what is the overall tone of the city. And if we do agree to do something like this, resettle refugees or build a community resource for the refugees who are in our community already, is there some place that we could put them that would be more accepting of them? And then hopefully as a whole city, that culture can start to change. And in the future, there would be opportunities to work in my district specifically to either resettle people or have those resources available to them.
Okay. So I'm going to take a quick sponsor break.
Yes.
But, okay. And I think Nick is actually all set.
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I've been
You go
listening.
ahead.
I've just been
No, I
working
know.
also.
I know you were.
Camera Corner Studios is the producer of this show, although I hold the name of Mr. Producer. Really, all the credit goes to Camera Corner Studios. We've got affordable packages for everyone. So whether you're trying to run a political campaign or a marketing campaign, or, you just got some YouTube videos, you want to kick it up a notch this time, give us a call at 920-272-0148.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. And I also have another sponsor called ReleaseWire. They have press release services, and I'm going to be doing some other cool things with them too. So I'm back here with Heba Mohammad. Sorry if I'm kind of butchering your name.
No, that's fine.
So I have a few more questions, and then with the few minutes that we'll have left after that, then we'll. My clock stopped.
That was intentional.
I know. I'm sorry.
I'm trying not to count the sponsor thing against the time of the candidates.
Thank you.
So.
Yeah. No. So yeah. I'm such a professional, right?
Oh, that's all right.
So I have a few more questions that I'm going to try to hit on things that I think that people would like to have answered. And then I'd like to give you a few minutes to just kind of wrap things up and you talk about whatever you want to finish off with. Okay.
Okay, great.
So, I guess I would like to hear a little bit more about your background. You have for Green Bay, you have a unique name. So, talk about some of that stuff, and just go ahead with that first.
Sure. So my background, I mentioned earlier that my parents are both refugees. They were both born in Palestine and came over to the States in the 80s. I was born here, as were all of my brothers. And we're in Milwaukee, like I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
Milwaukee's
So you have a big family?
I do have a big family,
Okay.
yeah. I have 6 brothers. And
Wow.
So, huge, right?
I have 4 brothers, and I think that's huge.
Okay,
so.
sure. Yeah. So we've been in Milwaukee our whole lives. That's where we've lived. It's a great city. I loved being there. But like I said, Green Bay is now my home.
Why'd you come here?
For school, and I always tell people picking UW Green Bay was mostly a shot in the dark. I had heard great things about its history program, which was initially the only program I wanted to be involved with. That was basically why I came. It was a huge leap of faith, but it worked out very well for me. Lots of opportunities that were presented to me, and I had a very good college experience. And as far as my name, I think a lot of people could assume this, although it's probably not the best route to go, but I am Muslim. That's what I was raised as. That's what I continue to follow and practice as my religion. But when I talk to people, I tend to describe myself as a more open-minded, liberal Muslim. And I say that in comparison to what they have as a stereotype in their mind. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that I am Muslim. And I would say that in the way that it's influenced me is just to be a better person and to care about other people more than, perhaps I would if I wasn't Muslim. And so I don't know. I mean, that's my identity. That's what I'm proud of. I'm not afraid to tell anyone about that. But I also hope that when people do have, questions about it, that they feel comfortable asking it. It's been my experience that most people who are afraid of someone who's different from them is because they've never met someone from that background or talked to them. And so it's been my mission, even when I was a student and doing some events within the city as well, to educate people about Islam. And I always have the disclaimer that what I say is not necessarily representative of what every single Muslim thinks, but I'll give a general overview of Islam as best as I can, and then tell people, this is what I believe, and if it's linked to Islam or not, that's just how it is.
And I'm not super religious, but I have that impression of all religions. There, there are people that have various beliefs within every religion.
Right.
So
precisely.
Yeah, and I would hate for anybody of a Christian to be pigeonholed because of the actions of somebody else. Like
Right.
I think that's wrong on every level. It's very closed-minded.
Right.
So have you had any like pushback on that? Have you? What's been your experience?
Sure. During my campaign right now, I haven't really experienced any of that. To be totally honest, we have had conversations, myself and people who are on my campaign team, of, how much do we want to advertise your name? When we're making signs, do we want to make the Heba portion bigger or the Mohammad portion bigger? And my response has been, it's not something that I'm necessarily apt to hide or that I want to hide. So right now, that's been our decision. We're just going to put it out there, and people can take it or leave it as they'd like. But I hope that when people are making their decisions to vote, it's based on how much they agree with me and my positions, and not necessarily my religion. And I wouldn't expect them to do that for someone of any other religion. So why make the exception?
So you think
here?
they might take your last name and make certain assumptions about you?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I pretend to be a marketing person, in my real life, and I would err on the side of going with a shorter name.
Sure.
Across the board.
Okay.
Because it's simpler. I do that for myself. That's
okay.
My last name isn't really, there's other people with that last name, but it's long. People don't know how to spell it. And
sure.
Why even deal with that, right? So they don't know how to spell my first name either. So
okay.
so I would fail at politics dreadfully, no matter what, which is why I'm not doing that.
Sure.
So that's interesting. So anything else about your family?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So I would just like to leave you the last few minutes to kind of just give your best push as to why you think people should get out and vote. So the election is April 5th. Okay. I had that somewhere. It's not on my screen right now.
Sure, that's all right. Yeah, so this April 5th election is a general election for local elections, but also the presidential primary. So I think more people perhaps come out to vote. That's the hope. But even if it wasn't, I would really hope that people would come out and voice their opinions, right? So I think in local government especially, people feel that they don't really have an impact, when in reality that's where they can have the most impact. And it's about knowing who to talk to, knowing who to reach out to, and a lot of that is also on the responsibility of the representative, right? To be able to get out there, make their name known, give out that contact information so that if someone, this is relevant because it just snowed, if someone's street isn't plowed, who do they call? They can call me, I'll get in touch with the right person. And I've noticed that when I have been talking to people, it's a lot of the little things that are their concerns. So why don't we have sidewalks on the street? How am I supposed to walk? On University, why don't we have bike lanes? Where is the safety aspect to all of our infrastructure, right? And snow removal, very big, relevant right now. So it's all these tiny issues that the city council can have a big role in. But I don't think if you're not involved in local politics or keeping up with it, you're not aware that that's the person who you're supposed to go to. So I think it's very important for people to get out there and vote, so they can feel like they're empowered and having a say in what's happening in their local city elections and how things are being run. And generally speaking, about my platform, my big issues are public transportation and making that better. Public services in general, I think we need to have more access to them, better access, and also more visibility with them. healthcare is a big thing in our area, particularly for individuals who are on state-sponsored insurance. There's not a lot of easy access, or it's not easy to work within that system, right? And because of my background, I care a lot about our environmental sustainability. And the bay is right along our district. We have Reynard Island, which is right off of Bay Beach, which is actually made up of the contaminated soil from the river. And so I don't know if a lot of people know that, but I think there's an opportunity there to make use of that island, despite its negative background. But yeah, so taking care of environmental issues, remediating the bay, and doing our best to make sure it doesn't happen again, where we have to spend 50 years unable to step foot into our waters and a great natural resource that we have. So those are my big three areas, and I'm always interested to hear what other people have to say so that they do feel invested in their local government and making sure that their voices are heard. So
when I go to the ballot, I always kind of distill the people down to a phrase or an adjective, and I'm not in your district, and I wish everybody the best that comes in here, right? And I just want them to get their message out. So if I had this perception of you being young and Muslim, and that's my only association, how would you change my thinking on that? Like, what would you like to be the phrase or the label that's put on you instead? And you did mention your platform, but like something catchy and brief.
Sure. I would say this platform is really about the voters. So for me, the priority is you and what you're interested in. And so I can have my own background and my own interests, but in the end, my priority is you and representing your opinions.
Okay. Thank you. Heba Mohammad.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Don't forget to run over to iTunes and Stitcher and give a rating and review of the show. It helps other people find us.
Cheers.